Hi and welcome. My name is Stephen. I am the Territory Manager for Tammuz Family here in Australia, UK and New Zealand. And we are very lucky today to have Dr. Mor, the Medical Director of California Centre for Reproductive Health. Dr. Mor, thank you so much for joining us today. I thought we'd start with a bit of an easy one, and maybe you can share with us a bit of your background in the IVF and surrogacy world.
So I've been practicing assisted reproductive techniques in the United States now since 2001, so over 20 years. I am running my own clinic, surgical center and IVF embryology lab in Los Angeles, and have been doing so on my own since 2008. We are a full-service IVF center providing all services from in vitro fertilization to gestational surrogacy and egg donation, and of course some more conservative treatments that we also offer patients, like inseminations. And we have been lucky enough to provide services to the greater Los Angeles area and now a growing international community over the past years.
Great. You mentioned part of that process is egg donors. So egg donors coming to the clinic to donate their eggs. How do these women become interested in this, and what do you look for in an egg donor?
Right, so egg donors can be known egg donors that are doing this for altruistic reasons because they are helping a family member. They are called directed or known egg donors, and there are egg donors that are recruited and are doing this for altruistic reasons as well, but mainly for monetary compensation. Donors are screened carefully for medical issues that might impact the procedures itself, the IVF process itself, but more importantly, medical issues that might arise in an offspring from those egg donors. So very stringent screening process for egg donors before they are accepted into the program. Some of the screening, aside from a full medical health screening, also includes the health of the eggs and the quantity of the eggs, in order to make the process as efficient as possible for egg donors and for intended parents who are going to be using eggs from that particular egg donor. We'd like to make that IVF cycle as efficient and successful as possible. And the donor is screened as part of her general screening with regards to egg health and egg number as well.
Right. And what about the other side of the coin, the surrogates? What do you look for in an ideal surrogate?
We're looking for an ideal mom. We're looking for someone that cared for her own pregnancies the same way she'll care for a pregnancy she's carrying for an intended parent. And that means we're looking for a surrogate that, of course, is taking care of herself, is medically fit, and doesn't have a past obstetrical history or issues in her general health that may impact the outcome of a successful surrogacy cycle. We're looking for compliance. We're looking for people that care. We look for people that understand how much is resting on their shoulders when they're carrying somebody else's child. And we're looking for people that understand the big picture and want a good outcome for the intended parents. And that's more on the personality part, social environment, and so on of the surrogate, which I think is extremely important. Aside from that, there's the medical and obstetrical screening that the surrogates go through.
When sometimes an intended parent might choose a clinic, one of the big questions they'll ask is success rates. Can you provide any commentary around how your clinic is doing in that area?
Yeah, success rates are fantastic. After proper screening of an egg donor, proper screening of the surrogate, if a surrogate is involved, and of course the sperm source, success rates generally will be on the order of 70 to 75% per embryo transfer, which is quite high, which means close to 3 out of 4 embryo transfers of embryos conceived from a donor egg will be successful.
For intended parents who are maybe deciding between different destinations, what is something that might stand out as an advantage of picking the USA as a destination for surrogacy?
I think success rates is one key element of why the U.S. is at the forefront. We are at the forefront in terms of the medical care that we give, implementation of new techniques, innovations in the IVF lab, innovations with how we prepare the uterus for implantation, innovations with how we stimulate the ovaries of egg donors. It's a combined approach. In the US, we are facing quite a bit of competition. Also, it just drives us to excel constantly and stay on the cutting edge. One of the things that I think makes the US super unique is that surrogacy done in the US, at least at our center, is done in a way to facilitate interaction between intended parents and the gestational surrogate. We firmly believe that intimate contact, interaction between intended parents and their surrogate is the key to a successful outcome. We encourage that interaction, and we've seen cases where that interaction was lapsing or lacking, and outcomes were less desirable. And so that may be unique to the United States to some extent, because in terms of what control the intended parent has over their pregnancy, which is what it is, that control can be exercised really well in the United States.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of the things that we say to our intended parents. If a relationship or that communication with your surrogate is quite important, the USA definitely offers that as an option. For those that may be concerned about recent changes in the legal landscape, how is the state of California handling that?
Well, to be clear, there had been only one state that was temporarily affected by the reversal of Roe versus Wade. That was Alabama. Within several weeks of that decision, the decision was reversed in the Alabama Supreme Court. The sentiment in general, in terms of legislation and the bureaucracy that controls what we do, has been pro-IVF overall in the United States. There have not been, to my knowledge, cases where IVF was prohibited, where frozen embryo transfers were prohibited, where embryos were safeguarded as human beings and not allowed to be transferred or discarded, for that matter. Certainly in California, which is an ultra-liberal state where we practice, there has never been any issue with regards to the legislation against in vitro fertilization.
Great. What are some common challenges or delays that some intended parents may see during the IVF process?
The importance for intended parents starting this process is to have an understanding of what a unique, multifaceted approach we implement in order to have a successful outcome. And that has to do with screening for surrogates, screening for egg donors, screening for the intended parents. And screening is this fancy word for let's check out to make sure everything is okay, but what if something is not okay, right? So what if something is diagnosed in a surrogate that could be surgically corrected, for instance, and not disqualify her from being used as a surrogate, but may incur delays. So the frustrating things that we encounter, and I think many intended parents encounter, is that these delays are necessary, and in the big picture they probably matter very little, but the delays are delaying the dream that the couple has to having a child. And every small delay becomes a big delay, emotionally and physically and sometimes financially. So the delays, as far as we're concerned, as we orchestrate this treatment as an IVF center, are necessary delays, because every delay, and this is important for intended parent to understand, is implemented because we want to safeguard that future pregnancy. We want to ensure that we're going to have a healthy pregnancy. We want to make sure that we optimize all conditions moving into that process. And so a delay is rarely going to be a delay that goes against that intent. It's always going to be pro-baby delay. And I think if you understand that and how involved and complex the process is and how many different facets there are to this process, I think most intended parents would understand that the delays can be lived with, that they can be handled, and that they're necessary.
Sometimes even when all the checks are done and everything seems optimal for that embryo transfer, we may not have a successful embryo transfer. In those kind of scenarios, does the surrogate get disqualified from that point on, or does she get another chance?
Well, so just as we did in the screening process leading up to that transfer and okaying and green lighting that transfer, if that transfer failed, we now have to really evaluate in a very comprehensive manner every single aspect of the treatment that may or may not have led to that failed transfer. And again, it's a reevaluation of the surrogate. It's a reevaluation of how compliant she was during the process. It's a reevaluation of the frozen embryo transfer that led to that, the protocol that was used on our end to stimulate and prepare the uterus for implantation. It's a reevaluation if the embryo quality wasn't fantastic on how we created those embryos in the first place. What is the likelihood that the next embryo that was conceived from that very same egg donation cycle, for instance, will achieve or result in the same negative result? It's a reevaluation that goes back to the intended parent, and it's a reevaluation that goes back to the egg donor as well. So it's a very comprehensive approach, and there are items that can be managed, and there are items that cannot be managed, which means that we occasionally would look at a failed transfer and say, well, you know what, I don't really see where I need to change or should change anything. We know success rates on a cumulative level will increase by embryo transfer, and they reach somewhere around 92-93% for an egg donation and gestational surrogacy cycle by the third transfer. We're not interested in getting to that third transfer if we can avoid it and achieve a pregnancy with the first transfer, which is why we stop, take a breath, and evaluate things. But there are oftentimes no reasons to change anything. And rest assured to your patients, your intended parents, that success rates will increase by the next transfer.
Are there any new advancements in technology or advancements in processes that we may see increases to success rates or success overall in the surrogacy journey?
The latest exciting advancement appears to be in the field of artificial intelligence. I almost said artificial insemination, AI. Same two letters. But we are evaluating now how big of an asset AI may or may not be for the IVF lab. I think it will be, and I think most IVF labs eventually will incorporate artificial intelligence into how we monitor the progress of, well, let's back up, how we evaluate eggs. AI can be used at that level to determine which eggs really should be most suitable for fertilization. And then the embryos that result, and how do we evaluate embryos, the development of the embryos beyond pre-implantation genetic testing in the chromosomal makeup of the embryo. Are there other markers that AI can contribute to in the development of that embryo that can tell me that embryo number 1, which is chromosomally normal, may have an advantage over embryo number 3, which is also chromosomally normal and graded equally in terms of achieving a live birth after the first transfer. So the field is I believe it's in its infancy. Most of the developments are happening at the level of the IVF lab. There have been recent developments in the clinical manner by which we treat patients that we've implemented. Most of them have had to do with frozen embryo transfers, which we are doing more and more and more of now. But as they come, and in order to stay on the cutting edge, we incorporate these developments for the best outcomes of our patients.
For intended parents that may be selecting an egg donor or going through an egg donor website, sometimes there'll be fresh egg donors and sometimes they'll be frozen. Do you advise your intended parents one way or the other?
Well, there are pros and cons for using fresh versus frozen eggs. Briefly, frozen eggs have been shown to have slightly lower implantation rates, meaning embryos conceived from frozen eggs may have slightly lower implantation rates than embryos conceived from fresh eggs. But on the other hand, the availability of frozen eggs is excellent. It's rapid. And it's slightly more affordable compared to a fresh egg donation cycle. So for each couple, I think the decision between frozen and fresh eggs is an individual decision. For instance, a couple may choose to go with fresh egg donation because the average egg donor will produce 20 or 25 eggs and plenty of embryos resulting from that for an entire family, really, for family building. Some couples may only be interested in a single child, and maybe for them, the thawing or the purchase and thawing of 6 or 7 eggs is more than enough to achieve their dream. So I think it's an individual decision. I think patients need to be counseled about the pros and cons of each of these treatments and then make an educated decision about it.